Chapter 1170. The heaven-engulfing seven limits was a powerful saber technique that had existed since ancient times. Legend had it that none of the people who cultivated this saber technique had a good ending. Of course, in Chuxio's opinion, this was pure bullshit. How could one not be stabbed in the underworld? Those who cultivated this saber technique were definitely not easy to deal with. It was very common for them to be killed along the way. In the past, the seven limits Chuxio had obtained in the minor mortal heaven was breaking C, which was one of the more advanced techniques among the seven limits. Right now, the seven limits recorded on the metal piece were actually the two most powerful techniques among the seven limits, heaven engulfing and earth destroying. Due to the limitations of its power, and the fact that it was too similar to the saber intent and ethereal slash, Chuxio had abandoned the Sea Destroyer technique. However, the power of the Earth Destroyer technique far surpassed that of the Sea Destroyer technique, and its effects were not as simple as the sharpness of the saber technique. Chuxio took a closer look at the records on the metal piece. In reality, this metal piece was not the carrier of the seven limits. Instead, a senior of the Imperial Sky Pavilion had accidentally discovered it in a secret zone and written it on the metal piece. Although it was not explicitly stated, it was clear that the senior had been in an extremely dangerous situation at the time. Otherwise, he would have taken the original version of the seven limits instead of making a copy. In the end, it was also written that the cultivators who wanted to cultivate this saber technique had to be cautious. The people who had fought for this saber technique in the past had all died a violent death. Chuxio pursed his lips. During the fight for the treasure, everyone was fighting and killing each other. It was normal for someone to die. Moreover, Chuxio could not help but sigh. The Imperial Sky Pavilion was truly rich and overbearing. A saber technique of the seven limits was considered a treasure no matter where it was placed. Of course, it was considered a treasure in the Imperial Sky Pavilion as well. Otherwise, the Imperial Sky Pavilion would not have placed it in the scripture repository. However, there were not many people who chose to cultivate the seven limits throughout the years. One reason was that the legend of the seven limits had been around for a long time, and the senior who had made a copy of it had issued a warning. Also, there was no need to cultivate. The Imperial Sky Pavilion had been developing for a long time. Whether it was the pavilion's own cultivation methods or the cultivation methods it seized from others, it could be said that there were countless cultivation methods it could give to its disciples. There were simply too many choices. Although the seven limits were strong, because of its legend and the warning of that senior, this cultivation technique was shrouded in a shadow. Other cultivators who wanted to cultivate this cultivation technique would have to consider it carefully. Was it really worth it to take such a huge risk for an irreplaceable cultivation technique? For many people, it was not worth it. Therefore, even though the earth destruction of the seven limits had been in the Imperial Heaven Pavilion for 10,000 years, not many people came to cultivate it. They had concerns, but Chuxio did not. Moreover, he had already broken through the sea-breaking realm, which meant he had already mastered the seven limits. If he practiced the earth destruction realm now, he would undoubtedly make progress faster. Chuxio took another look at the scripture depository after memorizing the earth destroyer. He did not find anything valuable, so he left. As soon as he left, an Imperial Heaven Pavilion disciple reported this to Lu Sanjin. Lu Sanjin pulled Chuxio aside and said, "It just so happens that you're out of closed-door cultivation. The old pavilion master wanted to see you." Chuxio raised an eyebrow. Why did everyone want to see him? Could it be that the old pavilion master also had designs on his teacher? However, Chuxio did not think so. Compared to Li Wuxiang, the old pavilion master was undoubtedly much more clear-headed. After meeting the old pavilion master this time, the only thing Chuxio felt was that the old pavilion master had aged a lot compared to the last time. It was not in terms of appearance, but in terms of aura. It was as if the sun was setting. When the old pavilion master saw Chuxio, the first thing he said was, "Wuxiang has been under too much pressure lately, so he's a little impatient. Please don't take it to heart. I'm aware of Guzun's rules. It's best not to leave the mountain if possible." Chuxio nodded and said, "Thank you for your understanding, old pavilion master. If I can help the Imperial Heaven Pavilion, I'd like to help as much as I can. The old pavilion master sighed and shook his head. Everyone says that the Imperial Heaven Pavilion is going to collapse, but I don't believe it. Over the years, the Imperial Heaven Pavilion has encountered so many calamities, but it has never collapsed. This time, I believe that the Imperial Heaven Pavilion will not collapse because of this. Chu Xiu, you've done well in the southern barbaric lands. Kangwu County has been completely stabilized, and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's headquarters can also put in more effort to manage other matters. However, I still have a question. I heard that Cold River City recruited you. Why didn't you agree? You should be able to tell that the Imperial Heaven Pavilion is indeed declining compared to Cold River City. Naturally, Chu Xiu could not say that he wanted to occupy the southern barbaric lands and become the king. After pondering for a while, Chu Xiu said, I cultivate Taoism, Buddhism, and Devil Tao, so I believe in karma. After I came out of the Diluo mountain range, I came to Fenglin County, which belongs to the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Then I met Brother Lu along the way and helped the Imperial Heaven Pavilion with the martial arts practice. My karma is already entangled with the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Since this is karma, I can't refuse it. Tempering oneself in the mortal world is to temper one's Tao heart. I don't care about the power and riches promised by Cold River City. Since that's the case, joining the Cold River City might go against my heart. Why should I do it? After listening to Chu Xiu, the old pavilion master nodded in satisfaction and said, Among the younger generation of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, you and Sanjin are the only ones who can be considered worthy. Back then Meng Xinghe helped Yi Weikong build Cold River City. You Chu Xiu are not inferior to Meng Xinghe. I don't expect you to help Sanjin to this step. I only hope that you can help him guard the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Alright, I've been nagging for so long. I'm sure all of you are tired of it. You may leave. After they left, Lu Sanjin heaved a long sigh and said, In the entire Imperial Heaven Pavilion, the old pavilion master is the most worried one. Otherwise, with the old pavilion master's age, he could have retired and stopped caring about the sex affairs. In the end, when something big happens in the Imperial Heaven Pavilion, the old pavilion master still has to step in to resolve it. When he said this, Lu Sanjin also had some complaints about Li Wuxiang. If Li Wuxiang had not been unable to support the Imperial Heaven Pavilion all these years, the Imperial Heaven Pavilion would not have fallen to this state. Chu Xiu could only comfort him. Don't worry. The Imperial Heaven Pavilion has been passed down for at least 10,000 years. It won't collapse so easily. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Chu Xiu left with Lu Jianghe and the others. Along the way, Lu Jianghe sighed and said, That fellow named Lu Sanjin is not bad. He has a good eye and knows how to conduct himself. However, I don't think the Imperial Heaven Pavilion will last much longer. When the Imperial Heaven Pavilion collapses completely, you should start making some preparations. For example, Kangwu County will become independent. Oh, how can you be so sure that the Imperial Heaven Pavilion will collapse so soon? Lu Jianghe pouted in disdain and said, What haven't I seen? Although a sect's strength or decline is related to the sect's current strength, it's also related to the sect's temperament. Moreover, it's very important. At this point, Lu Jianghe's eyes were filled with deep meaning as he said, The people in the Imperial Heaven Pavilion are disunited. Everyone wants to clean up the snow in front of their door. It'd be strange if a sect like that can survive until the end. Look, as long as there's an opportunity now, the Imperial Heaven Pavilion might face a huge change. Chu Xiu nodded thoughtfully. Although Lu Jianghe was unreliable most of the time, he indeed had the right to say that. As the former hall master of the Blood Demon Hall, Lu Jianghe had seen and even personally killed countless experts from major sects and sect leaders. Even if he had not experienced these things, he had seen them before. Naturally, this had little to do with Chu Xiu. The entire Kangwu County was like an iron bucket under his management. The authority of Su Fengshan and the others was gradually taken away. At the same time, all the key positions in the entire Kangwu County were transferred to the hands of Chu Xiu's trusted subordinates. Most importantly, even the southern barbaric land was under Chu Xiu's control. Therefore, Whether the Imperial Heaven Pavilion was around or not did not affect Chu Xiu much. If the Imperial Heaven Pavilion was around, he could use the tiger's skin of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion as a banner. After all, the Imperial Heaven Pavilion was the oldest top sect in the Daluotian world. It would be much easier to use the Imperial Heaven Pavilion's name to do things than to establish a sect by himself. If the Imperial Heaven Pavilion was not around, Chu Xiu could directly declare himself king, and nothing would happen for the time being. Even if he offended Cold River City would not touch him for the time being because of the prime sovereign behind him. After returning to the southern barbaric land, Chu Xiu and the others entered closed-door cultivation again. Chu Xiu, in particular, needed some time to digest the things he saw in the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Chu Xiu did not lack combat experience. What he lacked was experience in martial arts realms and cultivation. The people who recorded the records were all martial immortal experts from the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Chu Xiu had not touched the edge of this realm for the time being. Therefore, although the things left behind were very valuable, they were inevitably more mysterious. It was enough for Chu Xiu to cultivate for a period of time. There was also the earth-extinguishing saber technique of the 7 limits. Chu Xiu wanted to master this saber technique during this closed-door cultivation. Although Chu Xiu had learned breaking the sea and had some foundation, the power of the earth extinguishing and breaking the sea were completely different. The saber technique's artistic conception was also different, so he needed to master it from the beginning. In this way, Chu Xiu's closed-door cultivation lasted for more than 4 months. He originally wanted to try to break through to the heaven and earth enlightenment realm again, and successfully condense his domain. Who would have thought that Su Fengshan would knock on the door of his closed-door cultivation secret room at this time? After opening the door, Chu Xiu frowned and asked, "What happened?" Previously, Chu Xiu had instructed that his closed-door cultivation this time was very important. If there was nothing urgent, he should not be disturbed. It was best that Su Fengshan did not bother him for trivial matters. At this moment, the expression on Su Fengshan's face was very complicated. There was sorrow, disbelief, and a hint of helplessness. When he saw Chu Xiu, Su Fengshan paused and said, "Lord, there is news from the Imperial Heaven Pavilion headquarters that the old pavilion master has passed away. All the prefectural governors have to return to the Imperial Heaven Pavilion to attend the funeral." Chapter 1171. Chu Xiu was stunned when he heard that the old pavilion master was dead. How long had it been? He had just met the old pavilion master 4 months ago. Although the old pavilion master looked old and lethargic at that time, there was no aura of death. How was it possible that he had died in just 4 months? How did the old pavilion master die? Su Fengshan shook his head and said, "The news didn't say, but I'm sure he didn't die from a fight. I didn't hear about the old pavilion master going out recently, and I didn't hear about anyone breaking into the Imperial Sky Pavilion." Chu Xiu shook his head gently and sighed. He did not have any ill feelings toward the old pavilion master. Although the old pavilion master had asked him to come to Kangwu Prefecture with the intention of bewitching him, the old pavilion master had explained everything to him openly. Moreover, if Chu Xiu had not come to Kangwu Prefecture, he would not have been able to find his way back to the lower realms so quickly. Kangwu Prefecture will be fine as usual. I'll make a trip to the Imperial Sky Pavilion alone. Since the old pavilion master had passed away, the prefectural governors of the Imperial Sky Pavilion were obliged to make a trip to settle the funeral affairs. There was no need to fight on this trip, so Chu Xiu did not wake Lu Jianghe and the others up from their closed-door cultivation. Instead, he went alone. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Imperial Sky Pavilion, the entire pavilion was already in mourning. All the disciples looked sad. The old pavilion master had a high prestige in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. It was so high that Li Wuxiang could not compare to him. Li Wuxiang was strict when he did things, and he always talked about rules. Therefore, most of the cultivators in the Imperial Sky Pavilion feared him more than they respected him. The old pavilion master had truly treated the Imperial Sky Pavilion as his everything. He had given his all for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. He would do his best to take care of even an ordinary disciple. When the old pavilion master was still in the position, he had promoted Lu Sanjin, the East Region advisor. Jiaingzong, who had been an ordinary deacon, was also discovered and nurtured by him. In the Imperial Sky Pavilion, the old pavilion master treated everyone equally. Therefore, almost all the cultivators in the Imperial Sky Pavilion respected him very much. Now that the old pavilion master had passed away, the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion fell into a sorrowful atmosphere. As soon as Chu Xiu arrived, he walked into the main hall of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. The other county governors and elders of the Imperial Sky Pavilion were all present. When they saw Chu Xiu, most of the county governors instinctively looked at Chu Xiu as they sized him up. Chu Xiu had met the elders of the Emperor Heaven Pavilion before, but among the prefectural governors, Chu Xiu only knew Jiaingzong. He had never met the rest of them, but he had heard of Chu Xiu's name. When he saw Chu Xiu arrive, Li Wuxiang nodded towards Chu Xiu. However, there was a sliver of coldness on his face. It was obvious that he still held a grudge over what had happened last time. Jiaingzong, on the other hand, smiled at Chu Xiu and greeted him. He did not pay much attention to Li Wuxiang's attitude. He was also one of the old pavilion master's men. Moreover, Chu Xiu had saved him previously, so he owed Chu Xiu a favor. Lu Sanjin walked over with red eyes. He handed a white brocade robe to Chu Xiu and said in a low voice, "Brother Chu, please rest for a while. The old pavilion master's funeral will be held tomorrow." Among the people present, Lu Sanjin was the saddest in terms of sorrow. To him, the old pavilion master was like a teacher and a father. He was able to achieve what he had today because of the old pavilion master's guidance. Chu Xiu nodded and asked in a low voice, "How did the old pavilion master die?" "He died from exhaustion of his heart blood." Lu Sanjin said in a sorrowful voice. The old pavilion master was not young to begin with. However, he considered that the Imperial Sky Pavilion was in a crisis, so he could not rest in peace. Instead, he deduced martial arts every day, trying to deduce a method that could restrain the Cold River City's Ice Soul Divine technique. In the end, the old pavilion master encountered a bottleneck halfway through the deduction. However, he still forced himself to deduce it, which led to chi deviation. In the end, he died from exhaustion of his heart blood. Upon hearing Lu Sanjin's words, Chu Xiu shook his head slightly. The old pavilion master had indeed died unjustly. Chi deviation was something that would only happen to low-level cultivators, but the old pavilion master had encountered it. This should not have happened at all. If the old pavilion master could rest in peace, it would not be a problem for him to live for more than 10 years with his strength and cultivation base. At this moment, Li Wuxiang also said in a low voice, "Everyone is here. The funeral will be held on time tomorrow. Everyone should go and rest today." At this moment, Zhong Qianqiu suddenly said, "Where are you going to bury the old pavilion master?" Li Wuxiang frowned and said, "In the vital space realm, of course. Aren't all the past pavilion masters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion buried there?" Zhong Qiushui said plainly, "It's true that the past pavilion masters were buried in the vital space realm. However, the old pavilion masters' contributions to the Imperial Sky Pavilion are obvious to all. I suggest that the old pavilion master be buried in the primitive emperor realm to worship. He has the right to do so." Upon hearing this, the people present began to discuss among themselves. The Imperial Sky Pavilion had more than one blessed abode. The primitive emperor realm was the most important one. A few of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's ancestors were placed there. Only the pavilion masters who had made great contributions to the Imperial Sky Pavilion were qualified to enter the primitive emperor realm. At the same time, the primitive emperor realm contained several trump cards of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Most importantly, the primitive emperor realm was very small. It was only the size of a house. However, the chi of heaven and earth in it was terrifyingly rich. Therefore, only the pavilion masters could enter it to cultivate. Moreover, due to the need to accumulate chi of vitality, the primitive emperor realm could only be activated once every few years. Otherwise, once it was activated, the chi of heaven and earth in it would dissipate. A few years ago, Li Wuxiang had just used the primitive emperor realm. After a while, the primitive emperor realm could be activated again. However, Zhong Qiushui suggested to activate the primitive emperor realm now. It was obvious that he was going against Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang lowered his voice and shouted, "Zhong Qiushui, now is the time for the old pavilion master's burial. Do you still want to play those boring tricks? Is it interesting?" Zhong Qiushui looked at Li Wuxiang. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. It was a mocking smile. "Do you still think that I'm making things difficult for you on purpose?" As soon as he finished speaking, Zhong Qiushui's expression became extremely ferocious. "Li Wuxiang, don't forget that I was just a gangster on the streets. Because I offended a disciple of a large sect, I was dragged out by my own boss to vent his anger. It was the old pavilion master who saved me. I owe the old pavilion master my life. For so many years, I worked my heart out for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, and fought with my life on the line. What was it for? All for the old pavilion master's life. I'm not satisfied with you being the pavilion master. I'm not willing. But the old pavilion master said that you're more suitable than me, so I gave in. For so many years, although I've always been against you, as long as the old pavilion master told me to give in, when did I not? Do you know how much the old pavilion master has sacrificed so that you can sit firmly in your position as the pavilion master? Ask yourself, among so many pavilion masters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, is the old pavilion master really not qualified to enter the primitive emperor realm? Even now, you still think that I'm competing with you. Li Wuxiang, your thoughts are really dark. I'm just helping the old pavilion master get his rightful position." "Enough!" Li Wuxiang shouted angrily. "Do you think I don't want the old pavilion master to enter the primitive emperor realm? But now that the old pavilion master has just passed away, when Cold River City hears the news, they will definitely take action against the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Once the primitive emperor realm is activated, I can take advantage of this opportunity to gain more power, and not be so passive. Am I doing this for myself? I'm doing this for the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion." Zhong Qiushui sneered. "Even if you enter the primitive emperor realm 100 times, you're still no match for Yi Weikong. What's the point of saying all this? Do you dare to say that you're not doing this for yourself?" Li Wuxiang let out a long sigh and said in a deep voice, "That's enough, Zhong Qiushui. Don't forget, I'm the pavilion master now." "Yes, you're the pavilion master, Heavenly King Li Wuxiang. How impressive. The pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion is so domineering." Kind Autumn Water threw out these words indifferently, then turned around and walked away. Many of the elders and county governor present lowered their heads submissively, not daring to say a word. Regarding the conflict between Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui, of course they knew. It should be said that they had always known. But this was the first time they made such a big fuss, and even publicly shed all pretense of cordiality. Moreover, this was during the old pavilion master's funeral, which made them even more afraid to say anything. Li Wuxiang said with a gloomy expression, "Disperse." Everyone dispersed with different expressions. Chu Xiu followed behind Lu Sanjin. After he went out, he asked in a low voice, "What do you think of today's matter?" Lu Sanjin's face showed a hint of helplessness as he said, "I've long known about the messy feud between them and guessed that once the old pavilion master died, they would definitely make a fuss. But I never thought that they would make such a big fuss. Now, I only hope that the old pavilion master's funeral can be carried out peacefully." After saying this, Lu Sanjin also left with a gloomy expression. Obviously, he was extremely disappointed with Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui. After nightfall, Chu Xiu was meditating and cultivating in the bedroom that the Imperial Sky Pavilion had arranged for him. At this time he suddenly opened his eyes. The next moment, the door was pushed open and Zhong Qiushui walked in. Seeing that Zhong Qiushui had suddenly come looking for him, Chu Xiu was actually very calm. He even waved his hand and used his stellar energy to move a chair over and place it in front of Zhong Qianqiu. Seeing Chu Xiu's behavior, Zhong Qiushui had a puzzled expression on his face as he asked, "You knew that I would come looking for you?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I didn't know that you would come looking for me, Deputy Pavilion Master. I only knew that if someone came looking for me tonight, it would definitely be you, Deputy Pavilion Master." Zhong Qiushui revealed a playful expression on his face as he asked, Why? Do you know why I came looking for you? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Deputy Pavilion Master, you are already prepared to reveal your true intentions with Li Wuxiang, and are prepared to completely fall out with him. Of course, you have to unite all the forces that can be united. At this point, Chu Xiu pointed at himself and said, And I, Chu Xiu, am very important. It is worth it for Deputy Pavilion Master to personally rope me in. Chapter 1172. Zhong Qiushui looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He seemed to have just realized that the guy in front of him did not play by the rules. The words he had prepared to say before were useless now. Zhong Qiushui narrowed his eyes and said, Since you know I'm here to recruit you, are you prepared to accept my offer? Chu Xiu said faintly, I've said it before. I'm worth it. Since I'm worth it, I'll have to see what conditions Deputy Pavilion Master can offer. Zhong Qiushui waved his hand and said, Everything is negotiable. Most importantly, you should have seen what kind of person Li Wuxiang is. He is a selfish hypocrite. Zhong Qiushui snorted coldly. Li Wuxiang and I were both in the half-step martial celestial realm. We agreed to compete fairly. Whoever stepped into the martial celestial realm first would be the Pavilion Master. The loser would be convinced. If Li Wuxiang relied on his own ability to become the Pavilion Master, I would definitely respect him and not give him the slightest bit of trouble. But do you think he really stepped into the martial celestial realm with his own ability? He was the one who spoke ill of me in front of the old Pavilion Master. He thought that I was extreme, and that if I became the Pavilion Master, it would put the Imperial Sky Pavilion in danger. That was why the old Pavilion Master opened the primitive Emperor realm, and let him enter it to cultivate. In the end, Li Wuxiang obtained the powerful primordial qi that had been accumulated in the primitive Emperor realm for several years, and took the opportunity to step into the martial celestial realm. Actually, Li Wuxiang was right. I was extreme, but I couldn't stand his backstabbing behavior. If he had told me to my face that he wanted to be the Pavilion Master, I would have given it to him. As long as the old Pavilion Master felt that I was not suitable, I would not fight for it. In the end, he competed with me on the surface and spoke ill of the old Pavilion Master behind my back. If such a person was not a hypocrite, what was he? How did I get the position of Deputy Pavilion Master? The old Pavilion Master felt that he owed me, so he gave it to me. Otherwise, with Li Wuxiang's character, he would not even want to give me the position of prefectural governor. I have been brothers with Li Wuxiang for hundreds of years. I never thought that he would do such a thing. In other words, if he can treat me like this, how do you think he will treat you? Chu Xiu was a little surprised to hear Zhong Qiushui recount everything that had happened in the past. Although he knew that there must have been competition between Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui in the past, he did not expect Li Wuxiang to play it so dirty. He could even snitch behind Zhong Qiushui's back and act first and report later. However, this also proved how extreme Zhong Qiushui's character was back then. The old Pavilion Master would rather hand the position of Pavilion Master to Li Wuxiang, who was secretly snitching on him, than give it to Nakasaki. One could imagine that in the old Pavilion Master's opinion, if Nakasaki were to become the Pavilion Master, the Imperial Sky Pavilion's future would be even more miserable. So the seemingly just and dignified Li Wuxiang is a hypocrite, and you, Deputy Pavilion Master, are a true gentleman? Zhong Qiushui waved his hand and said, I'm not a true gentleman. On the contrary, I'm a vile person, a true vile person. I won't let go of anyone who goes against me in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, I'll do it openly and not behind their backs. When you first joined the Imperial Sky Pavilion, I thought you were Li Wuxiang's man because you were recruited by Lu Sanjin, so I didn't treat you well. However, have you seen me deal with you or scheme against you all this time? The one who schemed against you was your immediate superior, Li Wuxiang. Chu Xiu clapped his hands and said, You're right. A true vile person is more acceptable than a hypocrite person. However, the main problem now is Deputy Pavilion Master. Even if you rope me in, how confident are you that you can defeat Li Wuxiang? Even if the old Pavilion Master is gone, Li Wuxiang is still a martial immortal. Zhong Qiushui sneered. He stretched out a hand, and a bit of stellar energy appeared in his hand. But it was that bit of stellar energy that stirred and tore the void. Its power was so strong that it was shocking. Martial immortal. It was only when Zhong Qiushui displayed this level of power that Chu Xiu understood. No wonder Zhong Qiushui had the guts to fall out with Li Wuxiang today. It turned out that he had already reached the martial immortal realm. Zhong Qiushui laughed coldly and said, "Ever since Li Wuxiang became the pavilion master, he's devoted himself to power. Perhaps he himself has forgotten how long it's been since he last cultivated in seclusion. What about me? Even if I don't have the qualifications to enter the primitive emperor realm, as long as I'm done handling the affairs in my hands, I'll immediately start cultivating without any delay." Ever since he became the pavilion master, he had long forgotten how he had obtained this position. He still wants to compare himself to Yi Weikong. What qualifications does he have to compare himself to Yi Weikong? Even though Yi Weikong is already so old, he still takes out a month to cultivate in seclusion every year, and doesn't care about any matters of the sect. Although Li Wuxiang is a martial immortal, he doesn't have a heart for Tao. Chu Xiu agreed with Zhong Qiushui's words. In terms of power and power, the former was higher than the latter. Without power, what do you rely on to gain power? Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "It seems that you've prepared well, Deputy Pavilion Master. In that case, let's go back to the original question. What can I get?" "What do you want?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "It's very simple. Kangwu County, or rather the entire southern barbaric land, is under my jurisdiction. The people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion can either withdraw or come under my command. Don't come and give me orders if there's nothing important. To put it simply, I'm the master of the South China." Zhong Qiushui frowned and said, "You're the descendant of Gu Zun, and you'll definitely have to go back in the future. Why do you want so much power in the South China?" "You don't have to worry about this, Deputy Pavilion Master. The key is the entire power. Deputy Pavilion Master, are you going to give it or not?" Seeing Zhong Qiushui hesitate, Chu Xiu said faintly, "Since Deputy Pavilion Master has already stepped into the martial immortal realm, you must already have a well-thought-out plan. However, I can still rope in 2 people to help you, Deputy Pavilion Master. East Region Wayfarer Lu Sanjin and Fonglin County Chief Jiangzong." Zhong Qiushui frowned and said, "You helped Jiangzong a lot last time. Jiangzong can listen to you, but everyone knows that Lu Sanjin is Li Wuxiang's man. How can he betray?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Wrong, very wrong. Lu Sanjin has never been Li Wuxiang's man, but the old Pavilion Master's man. Anyway, as long as Deputy Pavilion Master agrees, I'll help you instigate Lu Sanjin to defect." Upon hearing this, Zhong Qiushui immediately nodded and said, "No problem. As long as this plan succeeds, from now on, everything in the southern wilderness will be under your control. Even the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion has no right to order you." With a smile on his face, Chu Xiu said, "I hope that Deputy Pavilion Master, oh no, Pavilion Master can abide by the agreement." Zhong Qiushui smiled disdainfully and said, "I already said that I'm not a hypocrite like Li Wuxiang. I, Zhong Qiushui, am a man of my word. I will never go back on what I promised." After saying that, Zhong Qiushui left immediately. Chu Xiu touched his chin at the back. He realized that Lu Jianghe's guess was really accurate. Sure enough, as long as an opportunity appeared in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, it would immediately encounter a great change. However, he also guessed wrongly. Although the Imperial Sky Pavilion would encounter a great change, it would not fall apart because there was a martial immortal like Zhong Qiushui. With a powerhouse in the martial immortal realm, it was enough to protect the Imperial Sky Pavilion. On the second day, in the main hall of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, all the elders, prefectural governor, and disciples were dressed in white robes with solemn expressions. Li Wuxiang held the funeral oration in his hand, and was about to read it when Zhong Qiushui suddenly said, "Li Wuxiang, have you made a decision? Where should the old Pavilion Master be buried?" Li Wuxiang paused, suppressed his anger, and said, "I already said that we have to consider the overall situation. Of course, the old Pavilion Master is qualified to be buried in the primitive Emperor realm, but now is not the time. Zhong Qiushui, Don't be unreasonable anymore. Don't forget, I'm the pavilion master now. A strange smile appeared on Zhong Qiushui's face. You're the pavilion master? If everyone recognizes you, then you're the pavilion master. If no one recognizes you, then you're nothing. Everyone present was shocked. What was the deputy pavilion master trying to do? Was he publicly challenging the pavilion master? Li Wuxiang's expression was extremely calm. He suddenly let out a long sigh and said, I knew that you wouldn't give up so easily. Unfortunately, we've been brothers for decades. I didn't expect that we would fall out as soon as the old pavilion master left. I really don't want to kill you. In fact, Li Wuxiang had already expected this scene today. Zhong Qiushui had been at odds with him for so many years. In the past, with the old pavilion master suppressing him, he would only argue occasionally, and did not dare to go too far. Now that the old pavilion master was gone, it would be strange if Zhong Qiushui did not cause some trouble with his personality. Therefore, Li Wuxiang had already prepared for this. After knowing and fighting each other for decades, there should be a result now. A gloomy killing intent appeared in Li Wuxiang's eyes. To resist external aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. If he did not get rid of Zhong Qiushui, who always gave him trouble, how could he resist Cold River City? Zhong Qiushui laughed loudly. Li Wuxiang, I really didn't expect this. I always thought that you and I had a friendship of over 100 years. I didn't expect that in your eyes. It was only a few decades. Never mind, perhaps from the day you stabbed me in the back, the friendship between you and me had already ended. Today, I stood up not for the position of pavilion master, nor for the hatred of the past. I only did it for the old pavilion master. In the past, the old pavilion master thought that I couldn't be the pavilion master, so he chose you. The old pavilion master had seen countless people and had seen countless people correctly, but he had misjudged you. Today you should go and apologize to the old pavilion master. As Zhong Qiushui's voice fell, he took a step forward, and the aura around him began to rise wildly. The power distorted the rules and changed the heaven and earth. The power of an expert in the martial immortal realm was completely revealed. Chapter 1173. Li Wuxiang realized that he had miscalculated. He had wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of Zhong Qiushui openly. Who would have thought that Zhong Qiushui had actually entered the martial immortal realm? When did this happen? At this moment, Li Wuxiang suddenly felt that Zhong Qiushui was very unfamiliar. In his memory, Zhong Qiushui was extreme and hot-tempered. He always liked to use violence to solve problems. Such a person could be a general, but he could not be a commander. Now Zhong Qiushui was even hiding the fact that he had entered the martial immortal realm from him. This made him feel that things were out of his control. You've entered the martial immortal realm? Very good. You've been hiding this news all this time. After entering the martial immortal realm, you didn't think about solving the Imperial Sky Pavilion's problems or resisting Cold River City. Instead, you started an internal strife at this time. Zhong Qiushui, your wild ambition has finally been revealed. Zhong Qiushui sneered and said, Don't put it in such a dignified manner. Li Wuxiang, I know you can't tolerate me. If I had exposed my cultivation earlier, I would only have had two choices. One was to be forcefully sent by you to fight Cold River City, and the other was to be forced to leave the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Today, you can call me wild ambition, or I've been planning this for a long time. It's time for an end between the two of us. The current Zhong Qiushui no longer cared about his reputation. In other words, the power he had accumulated over the years was enough for him to ignore these rumors and slanders. As Zhong Qiushui stepped forward, several elders and over 10 attendants who had always been on his side stood behind him and made their stand clear. One had to admit that Zhong Qiushui was quite a good person. No matter what method he used, at least for now, a large number of Imperial Sky Pavilion's disciples were willing to rebel with him. Li Wuxiang sneered and said, Looks like you've done a good job in winning people's hearts over the years. There are actually so many people who are willing to follow you to the end. However, don't forget that I'm still the pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. As he spoke, Li Wuxiang shouted angrily at the other cultivators who had not stepped forward. Do it! Lu Sanjin and Jiangzong stood beside Chu Xiu. Both of them were still in a daze, not knowing how things had turned out this way. After so many years, they had always been considered the old pavilion master's people. However, the old pavilion master had already retired, so they naturally had to stand on Li Wuxiang's side. When they heard that Li Wuxiang was going to make a move, they subconsciously wanted to step forward, but they were stopped by Chu Xiu. Jiangzong was puzzled. "Brother Chu, what are you doing?" Chu Xiu said lightly. "Didn't Brother Xie say that you owe me a favor? Now it was time to return the favor." Back then, it wasn't the Imperial Sky Pavilion that helped you resolve the crisis in Fonglin County. In fact, if it weren't for me, the Imperial Sky Pavilion would have abandoned you. After hearing Chu Xiu's words, Jiangzong immediately understood that Chu Xiu had already sided with Zhong Qiushui. However, Jiangzong did not dislike Chu Xiu's choice. This was because he also had some complaints about Pavilion Master Li Wuxiang, especially after the rebellion in Fonglin County. In the beginning, Jiangzong had thought that he had gone overboard. However, he later found out that Cold River City had instigated it. Since that was the case, the Imperial Sky Pavilion headquarters had not sent anyone to rescue him. It was obvious that they were prepared to abandon him. If Lu Sanjin had not pulled Chu Xiu over, and Chu Xiu's shocking strength had not allowed him to resolve the rebellion swiftly and decisively, he would have been in deep trouble. Therefore, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, Jiangzong lifted his head to look at Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui. He stopped in his tracks and did not walk out. Lu Sanjin, on the other hand, looked at Chu Xiu in disbelief. "Brother Chu, you actually sided with Zhong Qiushui?" All these years, Lu Sanjin and Zhong Qiushui had actually had many conflicts. He represented the old pavilion master, and the old pavilion master naturally supported Li Wuxiang as the pavilion master. Therefore, he had often gone against Zhong Qiushui. This time, he almost subconsciously wanted to stand on Li Wuxiang's side. Chu Xiu said nonchalantly, "I didn't side with Zhong Qiushui. I just feel that Li Wuxiang is not fit to be the pavilion master. Brother Lu, you know everything I've done in Kangwu County. You also know how I've been treated. Is this kind of person worthy of being the pavilion master? Does the future of the Imperial Sky Pavilion really have a future in his hands? I admire the old pavilion master, but he, Li Wuxiang, isn't qualified for me to admire him. Brother Lu, don't forget that you've never been Li Wuxiang's man. You've always been the old pavilion master's man." Chu Xiu's words reverberated in Lu Sanjin's heart, causing his entire body to tremble. Actually, Lu Sanjin had always been dissatisfied with Li Wuxiang. Other than the 2 times Chu Xiu had done it, there had been a few times before. At that time, Lu Sanjin felt that Li Wuxiang had done something inappropriate. Therefore, he had made a suggestion, but it had been rejected by Li Wuxiang. Although Lu Sanjin was dissatisfied, the old pavilion master had said that Li Wuxiang was the pavilion master. A pavilion master naturally had to have the dignity of a pavilion master, and could not be easily rejected by his subordinates. Therefore, he had asked Lu Sanjin to listen to Li Wuxiang's orders. Zhong Qiushui led a group of people to rebel, and Chu Xiu was also unwilling to stand on Li Wuxiang's side. This made Lu Sanjin feel doubtful. Did he, Li Wuxiang, have the qualifications to sit on this position? Chu Xiu, you deserve to die. Li Wuxiang could not help but roar angrily when he saw this. Actually, it did not matter where Chu Xiu stood. This was because Li Wuxiang had never regarded Chu Xiu as one of his own from the beginning. There were more than 1 or 2 descendants of Gu Zun in the Jianghu. How many of them could truly stay in the Jianghu? In any case, in Li Wuxiang's opinion, it was meaningless for the Imperial Sky Pavilion to spend so much effort to nurture Chu Xiu. This was because Chu Xiu was destined not to stay in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, Lu Sanjin was different. He was the Eastern Region advisor and the old pavilion master's chosen successor. His prestige in the Imperial Sky Pavilion was very high. It did not matter if other people rebelled, but Lu Sanjin's rebellion would cause a large number of Imperial Sky Pavilion's cultivators to change sides. Lu Sanjin, don't listen to Chu Xiu's nonsense. He's not a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. His actions are filled with evil intentions. This is a time of crisis for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, And there's great pressure from Cold River City. Can you bear to see the Imperial Sky Pavilion being destroyed overnight? Before Lu Sanjin could speak, Chu Xiu smirked coldly and said, "What a nice way to say that I'm not a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I didn't expect that after all I've done. I'm still an outsider in the Pavilion Master's eyes. The situation in Kangwu County was a mess. I only went there because the old Pavilion Master spoke. What happened in the end? In a year's time, I've completely pacified Kangwu County. All the barbarian tribes are under the Imperial Sky Pavilion's control. All these years, the Imperial Sky Pavilion has been bullied by Cold River City. How much vexation have we endured? I was the one who killed Yi Tianqing and avenged the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Also, there was a rebellion in Fonglin County. That was a county under the Imperial Sky Pavilion's control. Pavilion Master Li, you didn't care about it at all, and even seemed to have the intention of giving up. I was the one who helped Jie Yingzong resolve the rebellion in Fonglin County. I've done so much, but in your eyes, I'm still an outsider with evil intentions. It's pathetic and ridiculous." When the other neutral Imperial Sky Pavilion cultivators heard Chu Xiu's words, their hearts wavered. It was true that Chu Xiu was an outsider. Although he was an honored guest, wasn't an honored guest still an outsider? However, most of the people in the Imperial Sky Pavilion felt that the Imperial Sky Pavilion had actually benefited from Lu Sanjin roping in Chu Xiu as an honored guest. Putting aside the fact that he had helped the Imperial Sky Pavilion win a match against the High Heaven sect during the martial arts show, the things that Chu Xiu had done after he joined the Imperial Sky Pavilion were obvious to all. Now that Chu Xiu had openly rebelled, Li Wuxiang could say that Chu Xiu was a traitor. However, saying that he was just an outsider was indeed a little too much, and it was a little bitterly disappointing. At this moment, Zhong Qiushui laughed and said, "Little fellow Lu, you've been helping Li Wuxiang all these years, and you've indeed gone against me many times. You've gone against me, and I've gone against you as well. However, have you ever seen me play dirty against you even once after so many times? You and I have different standpoints, so you don't have to worry about those things that happened before. You were selected and cultivated by the old Pavilion Master, and so am I. Therefore, you and I should be the same kind of people. Today, I'm only doing this for the old Pavilion Master, and to vent my anger. I don't really want the position of Pavilion Master. Once I get rid of Li Wuxiang, you, the Eastern Territory partner, can become the Pavilion Master ahead of time. You're also someone chosen by the old Pavilion Master, but I think you're more reliable than Li Wuxiang. As long as you become the Pavilion Master, I will do my best to assist you and never touch the position of Pavilion Master for the rest of my life. If I violate this oath, let me die a horrible death." As soon as Zhong Qiushui said this, everyone was stunned, including Li Wuxiang. Since he had said this in front of everyone, there was no room for him to take it back. Otherwise, Zhong Qiushui's reputation in the Imperial Sky Pavilion would be ruined, and it would directly cause dissension among the disciples. Nobody would have thought that Zhong Qiushui's plotting for so long was really not for the position of Pavilion Master. It was as simple as venting his anger and pulling Li Wuxiang off his high horse. Lu Sanjin was silent for a moment, then he took a step back and said, "I'm not qualified to inherit the position of Pavilion Master now, and I don't want it either." However, Li Wuxiang was personally chosen by the old Pavilion Master after all, so I won't go against him. However, today I won't make a move either. I'll just be a spectator. Although Lu Sanjin said he wouldn't make a move, the moment he said this, he had already made it clear that he was on Zhong Qiushui's side. At this moment, all the people who had previously remained neutral seemed to have found their backbone, and they all stood behind Lu Sanjin. To them, they didn't want to get involved in the conflict between the Pavilion Master and the Deputy Pavilion Master. Therefore, it was best for them to remain neutral now. No matter who won in the end, they would still be used. However, as a large number of people chose to remain neutral, there were not many people who were loyal to Li Wuxiang. In fact, there were even fewer people than those on Zhong Qiushui's side. Chapter 1174. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Li Wuxiang's way of doing things and using people was very old-fashioned. It could be said to be old-fashioned and decadent. In his opinion, As long as he occupied the position of pavilion master, everyone would have to listen to him. His authority came from his current position. Therefore, the impression that Li Wuxiang gave people was only dignity, the dignity that belonged to the pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. There was nothing wrong with doing this, but Li Wuxiang had forgotten who gave him this dignity. When he was no longer in this position, or when his position was challenged, like now, what awaited Li Wuxiang would be the betrayal of his own people. Seeing that there were only so few people left on his side, Li Wuxiang laughed and said, Good. I didn't expect that after so many years in charge of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, what I've nurtured are a bunch of disloyal and unjust people. Zhong Qiushui said lightly. Their loyalty is only to the Imperial Sky Pavilion, not to you, Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang, after all these years, why haven't you thought about it? What right do you have to make them loyal to you? Li Wuxiang snorted coldly and waved his hand. Zhong Qiushui, I really didn't expect you to have such a scheme. You've been planning for this day for a long time, haven't you? But you've forgotten the most important thing, and that is strength. I entered the martial celestial realm earlier than you. And that's how I became the pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Although I don't know when you entered this realm, I dare say that it hasn't been long. What level of heaven are you now? First or second level of heaven? There are strong and weak martial celestials too. Zhong Qiushui narrowed his eyes and said, You've also forgotten the most important thing. From the beginning, you've been inferior to me. If you didn't have the power of the primitive emperor realm, do you think you could have entered the martial celestial realm earlier than me? Strength. What I want to compete with today is not just influence, but strength. As Zhong Qiushui's voice fell, his figure fluctuated. As if he had crossed an entire space, he directly attacked Li Wuxiang. Li Wuxiang's body shone with a dazzling divine light. And he also threw a punch, colliding with Zhong Qiushui's punch. Suddenly, a powerful wave burst out, and the surrounding laws of power began to tremble and shine wildly. The might of the battle between martial immortal level experts covered an enormous range. The expressions of the crowd present immediately changed. They began to move back repeatedly. At the same time, the spirit formations in the palace hall were activated. Li Wuxiang looked at Zhong Qiushui in shock. Fourth heaven? How could this be? Exactly when did you become a martial immortal? How could you have cultivated to the fourth heavenly layer? Much later than you. But while you're busy fighting for power, I'm cultivating. While you were busy consolidating your prestige as the pavilion master, I was still cultivating. On the path of martial arts, those who have reached the peak are the most important, not just by looking at age. I can't display my skills here, and I might even offend the old pavilion master. Let's fight outside. As they spoke, the two of them fought until they were outside. The entire Imperial Sky Pavilion could feel the powerful energy waves. Chu Xiu said calmly to the cultivators standing on Zhong Qiushui's side. I say, what are you all waiting for? The important figures have gone outside to fight. Why haven't you taken care of them? Don't tell me you think you can keep them? Zhong Qiushui would not pursue those who chose to remain neutral, because they were the true strength of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, those who chose to stand on Li Wuxiang's side and were loyal to him must be taken care of. After hearing Chu Xiu's words, Zhong Qiushui's people finally reacted and immediately began to fight the other side. Chu Xiu said to Jiangzong, Brother Jia, if you're prepared to submit to Zhong Qiushui, then make your move now. Otherwise, you won't get the chance if you wait any longer. Jiangzong clenched his teeth and immediately joined the battle. Although Jiangzong was not on Li Wuxiang's side, his desire for power was still very strong. To be more precise, his desire for power was only because he wanted to be transferred back to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters to cultivate. When Li Wuxiang was around, he had never expressed his absolute loyalty to Li Wuxiang. Hence, he would have to pay a hefty price to be transferred back to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. If Zhong Qiushui won this battle, he might not have to waste his time in Fenglin County anymore. He could be transferred back to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. There was no suspense in this battle. There were actually more people on Zhong Qiushui's side than on Li Wuxiang's side, and they were also stronger. Hence, Chu Xiu could not be bothered to intervene in that battle. He did not choose to submit to Zhong Qiushui. Instead, he chose to cooperate with Zhong Qiushui. He pulled Lu Sanjin along and said, "It's rare to see a battle between martial immortals. Come, let's go take a look." Lu Sanjin had a complicated expression on his face as he followed Chu Xiu out. He really did not want to see Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui killing each other. However, he was not that naive. If Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui were still the Imperial Sky Pavilion's two heroes and they trusted each other, things wouldn't have turned out this way. However, since they were already at odds, one of them had to win. Otherwise, the Imperial Sky Pavilion would never have a day of peace. Moreover, deep down, Lu Sanjin still hoped that Zhong Qiushui would win because he was completely disappointed in Li Wuxiang. The Imperial Sky Pavilion ended up in such a state in Li Wuxiang's hands. If Zhong Qiushui was in charge, would it be as bad as it was now? At this moment, outside the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Zhong Qiushui and Li Wuxiang were already engaged in an intense battle. Actually, Chu Xiu could not tell how a martial immortal was stronger than the heaven and earth mystic insight. It was the same even though he had read so many cultivation methods and records in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. This was because most of the descriptions were unclear. Sometimes, it was just a person's opinion. Now that he saw Zhong Qiushui and Li Wuxiang fighting, Chu Xiu had a rough understanding of what a martial immortal was. The person who named this cultivation level martial immortal had already described this cultivation level very vividly. Martial immortals. Immortals were capable of accomplishing what humans could not. No matter how powerful the heaven and earth mystic insight cultivators were, their power, their domain, and everything they controlled originated from this world. The level of a martial immortal was beyond the scope of this world. Let there be light. The power of a martial immortal could even affect the power of rules and brighten the dark night. In the past, when Yi Weikong of Cold River City came to cause trouble for Chu Xiu, as he unleashed his power, Kangwu County, which had never seen snow before, was covered in fluttering snow. Even after Yi Weikong left, the temperature of Kangwu County still dropped a lot, and it took half a month for the temperature to recover. This kind of power was indeed similar to that of an immortal. It was no wonder that most of the Daluotian cultivators believed that only martial immortals were qualified to control remarkable powers. This was because remarkable powers, which were formed by the rules of heaven and earth, were actually of the same origin as the power of martial immortals to change the rules. Chu Xiu now had a rough understanding of where remarkable powers came from. If a martial immortal had complete control over a rule in the world, he would also be able to materialize it into a divine power. However, there were not many martial immortals who could do this. At the very least, Chu Xiu had never heard of any martial immortals who could directly create remarkable powers. Perhaps there was one, and that was Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiu had never seen the clear sky illuminating shadow in the many records in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. In midair, the ripples created by the fight between Zhong Qiushui and Li Wuxiang seemed to be tearing the void apart. The law of power was constantly being torn apart in mid-air, and was constantly being destroyed. The powerful ripples of power exploded layer by layer. It was as if the heavens were falling and the earth was cracking. Divine light blossomed from Chu Xiu's eyes. He unleashed the heaven's sun gazing at air to its extreme, and began to frantically analyze the power and ripples created by the fight between the two of them. Unfortunately, there were very few things that Chu Xiu could understand. After all, there was a great realm between them. Right now, Chu Xiu had not even touched the border of martial immortal. Lu Sanjin, who was at the side, was in an even worse state. He could not understand anything. A fight of this level was already somewhat beyond his understanding. He stood there as if he was only waiting for the outcome of the fight. The two of them had already exchanged countless blows. After roughly 8 minutes, the outcome of the fight was obvious. Li Wuxiang was already spitting blood from Zhong Qiushui's attacks. He was almost powerless to retaliate. Li Wuxiang looked at Zhong Qiushui in shock. He could not believe it. He had clearly entered the martial immortal realm much earlier than Zhong Qiushui, and had even used the powerful qi of the world in the primitive emperor realm to cultivate many times. However, he was no match for Zhong Qiushui now. Zhong Qiushui, very good. You've done very well. I really did not expect you to reach this stage today. Li Wuxiang's eyes were filled with unwillingness as he said, "Don't force me to use that thing. Leave. Take your people and leave. Today we will part ways." Zhong Qiushui's eyes were filled with disdain as he said, "Li Wuxiang, you really are a selfish person. If our positions were switched today, even if I lost, I would have lost wholeheartedly. I would have made my people give up resisting and preserve the strength of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, you would rather split up the Imperial Sky Pavilion than admit defeat. Is such a person worthy of being the Pavilion Master? Hand over everything that the Imperial Sky Pavilion has given you. You're courting death." A cold look appeared in Li Wuxiang's eyes. He originally did not want to use that thing because the price to use it was very high. Moreover, after using it once, he would need to rest for a period of time. He was prepared to use it to resist Cold River City. He did not expect to have to use his trump card so soon. However, it seemed that it was impossible not to use it now. Li Wuxiang took out a broken longsword from his body. The entire scabbard was covered in rust and looked extremely old. Lu Sonjin's expression changed as he said in a low voice, "That is the Imperial Sky Pavilion's inherited treasure, the Imperial Heaven Sword. It is said that the ancestors of the Imperial Sky Pavilion once used it to slay an ancient demon god. It was stained with the blood of the demon god, and became extremely violent. It is not something that can be controlled by ordinary people." Li Wuxiang held the Imperial Heaven Sword in his hand. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. However, the next moment his expression changed. By the time he pulled out the Imperial Heaven Sword, there was no sword left. Only the hilt was left. Chapter 1175. Li Wuxiang had been preparing for a long time, but in the end, he only took out a sword hilt. This was indeed quite funny. However, this was not the place to laugh. Li Wuxiang looked at the sword hilt and looked at Zhong Qiushui in disbelief. "You swapped it." Zhong Qiushui extended his hand, and an ancient bronze sword appeared in his hand. It was stained with blood, and it emitted a powerful force that made people shudder. Zhong Qiushui laughed coldly. "Li Wuxiang, you can't even protect the Imperial Sky Pavilion's treasure. What right do you have to be the Pavilion Master? You can't even be sure if the people around you can be trusted. Among the past Pavilion Masters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, I don't think there's anyone weaker than you." Li Wuxiang's eyes flickered with a complicated expression. Perhaps even now, he could not believe that he had lost to Zhong Qiushui. In his heart, Zhong Qiushui was an extreme person who was impulsive and easily angered. To put it simply, he was just a martial artist. Although he was talented and had a high level of comprehension, how could he compare to him? Today he realized that people could change. Unknowingly, Zhong Qiushui had become a stranger to him. He had become someone he could not recognize. For example, this time, he had no idea when Zhong Qiushui had stepped into the martial immortal realm. He also did not know when Zhong Qiushui had started planning. He also did not know when Zhong Qiushui had swapped the Imperial Heaven Sword. He had lost in terms of strength, and he had lost in other areas as well. He had lost completely and utterly. With a furious roar, Li Wuxiang's aura suddenly erupted. The entire world turned into a boundless blood-colored domain, and a Dharma form was born from the boundless blood-colored domain. The Dharma form seemed to connect the heavens and the earth. It had the body of a powerful demon god, but it had a dignified expression. It was like a divine general or a heavenly king. Powerful energy waves stirred the void, and thunderclouds instantly filled the sky. Divine power. Chu Xiu immediately sensed that this was the aura of a divine power. However, this was not just a divine power. Li Wuxiang had even integrated his other cultivation methods into it, making it even more powerful. The Heavenly King Dharma form held the power of lightning in its hands, and it turned into two spears that shot toward Zhong Qiushui. The lightning power was so glaring that Chu Xiu had to close his eyes and use his spiritual sense to sense everything. In the next moment, layers of ripples appeared around Zhong Qiushui's body. As his fingers fell, ripples appeared wherever they passed. However, regardless of whether it was the power of the world or the terrifying lightning, they all strangely began to dissipate when they came into contact with the ripples. It wasn't a counteraction of power. Instead, it had turned into nothingness. It was as if this power didn't exist in this world at all. The lightning dissipated, the heavenly king's dharma form collapsed, and the blood domain could no longer cover the sky. Zhong Qiushui's sword finger stabbed straight into Li Wuxiang's chest, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Perhaps even the blood had been dispersed by the power of this finger. Li Wuxiang's face was as pale as paper. Looking at Zhong Qiushui, his face actually revealed a trace of a smile. This is the mystical power that our Imperial Sky Pavilion's second-generation ancestor possesses, solitary nothingness. When did you learn it? Zhong Qiushui said expressionlessly. If I say that I learned it before I entered the martial immortal stage, would you believe me? Li Wuxiang laughed out loud and said, I believe you, of course I believe you. As expected, I've always been inferior to you. At the very last moment, Li Wuxiang realized that he had actually been jealous of Zhong Qiushui all this while. He was a direct descendant of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, and Zhong Qiushui was merely picked up by the old pavilion master. What right did Zhong Qiushui have to stand shoulder to shoulder with him? However, who would have thought that Zhong Qiushui's cultivation speed would be so fast? It was so fast that Zhong Qiushui was closing in on him at all times. Hence, Li Wuxiang could only cultivate even more fervently to prevent himself from being surpassed. Day after day, year after year, both of their cultivation bases grew stronger and stronger. However, nobody would have thought that the so-called duo heroes of the Imperial Sky Pavilion would improve so quickly just because one did not want to fall behind and disappoint the old pavilion master, while the other did it out of jealousy and did not want to be surpassed. When they were fighting for the position of pavilion master, Li Wuxiang was not confident. He knew that Zhong Qiushui's talent was slightly higher than his. At that time, there was almost no difference between them. He was not confident that he could enter the martial immortal stage before Zhong Qiushui. That was why he slandered Zhong Qiushui behind his back. Perhaps from that time onward, Li Wuxiang had truly changed. He only thought about himself, and did not want anyone to surpass him. Between him and Zhong Qiushui, there was not 100 years of friendship, nor a few decades of friendship. In fact, there was not even a year of friendship between them. From the very beginning, he had been jealous of Zhong Qiushui. His heart could not contain anyone else. Looking at his chest, Li Wuxiang mumbled, I thought I'd already gotten rid of my inner demon. Never would I have thought that my heart has always been occupied by it. As Li Wuxiang's words left his mouth, his life force rapidly dissipated, and he finally fell to the ground. Seeing the martial immortal stage expert, who was also the previous pavilion master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, die before him, Chu Xiu was not surprised. He merely felt a little emotional. In truth, even in the end, Li Wuxiang did not understand himself. He thought that his choice was merely the doing of his inner demon. He did not expect that it was actually his true thoughts. A leopard could change its spots, but a person's nature was difficult to change. Cultivation techniques could be cultivated, and cultivation realms could be increased. However, a person's nature could not be changed that easily. Someone like Zhong Qiushui was clearly in the minority. At that moment, Zhong Qiushui stood there for a long time without saying anything. It was unknown whether it was because he had overexerted himself from using a divine ability, or because his friend and opponent, who had been entangled with him for over 100 years, had finally died by his hand. At that moment, the battle in the palace hall had also ended. Li Wuxiang's trusted aides had either died or surrendered. The chaos in the Imperial Sky Pavilion lasted for less than 2 hours before it was quelled. Of course, Zhong Qiushui had most likely prepared for all of this for several years, or even over a dozen years. Zhong Qiushui turned to look at Lu Sanjin and said in a deep voice, What I said earlier still stands. You'll be the Imperial Sky Pavilion's pavilion master. In truth, Li Wuxiang was right about one thing. I'm indeed extreme in the way I do things, and I'm easily influenced by others. As the leader of a sect, it's not a mistake to maintain the status quo. My mistake is being too extreme. You're the Eastern Region traveler personally chosen by the previous pavilion master, the next successor to the pavilion master. In fact, you're even ranked among the younger generation of the Daluotian. You're more suitable for this position than me. Lu Sanjin shook his head with a bitter smile and said, I can't take it. The position of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Pavilion Master is not only the core of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, but it's also important to outsiders. With my meager strength, I'll only be a laughingstock if I take the position of Pavilion Master. The Imperial Sky Pavilion's Pavilion Master must be a martial immortal stage expert, and only a martial immortal stage expert. Who did not want the position of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Pavilion Master? It was only natural that Lu Sanjin wanted it as well. Although he was the Eastern Region traveler, and theoretically the successor to the Imperial Sky Pavilion, that was only in theory. There were many Eastern Region travelers who did not become the Pavilion Master in the end. Even so, Lu Sanjin knew his own limitations. The position of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Pavilion Master was not something that just anyone could sit on. When the Imperial Sky Pavilion was announced to the outside world, the other sects were all martial immortals. In the end, he was the only cultivator in the true fire spirit refinement realm. This was simply a joke. Thus, the position of Pavilion Master had to be taken by Zhong Qiushui. Zhong Qiushui said in a deep voice, Since that's the case, I won't pass on this responsibility. I'm not Li Wuxiang. I won't go back on my words. Lu Sanjin, you're still the Eastern Region traveler. No one can take away the position of Pavilion Master's successor. As long as you become a martial immortal in the future, I'll immediately step aside. I'll keep this position for you for the time being. As for the others, everyone will continue doing what they should be doing. Although the Pavilion Master of the Imperial Sky Pavilion has changed, the world hasn't. Zhong Qiushui was a completely different person from the rash, hot-tempered, and extreme Zhong Qiushui of the past. At the very least, his arrangements were reasonable, and he did not cause too much chaos in the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Great changes had already happened. Thus, not changing now was the best way to deal with it. The funeral of the old Pavilion Master continued, but the place of burial was changed to the primitive Emperor realm. From Li Wuxiang's point of view, it was not worth wasting an opportunity to use the vitality of the primitive Emperor realm just to bury a dead man. However, from Zhong Qiushui's point of view, the old Pavilion Master was already dead. This was what he deserved. No one else had the right to take away all of this. However, this also made the people of the Imperial Sky Pavilion feel more at ease about Zhong Qiushui. This was a person who cherished old friendships. The old Pavilion Master's kindness to Zhong Qiushui hadn't changed even after so many years. Even if the old Pavilion Master was biased towards Li Wuxiang, he probably wouldn't settle scores with those who didn't stand on his side. After the funeral, Chu Xiu bade farewell to Zhong Qiushui and prepared to return to Kangwu Commandery. Zhong Qiushui waved his hand and said, Go back. I have already sent the news to Kangwu Commandery. The entire Kangwu Commandery, including the southern barbarian land that you have conquered, is under your command. If you want to report the news to the headquarters, just report it to the headquarters. As for the personnel appointments, you have the final say. Lu Sanjin looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He only knew that Zhong Qiushui had used this condition to get Chu Xiu to stand on his side. However, why did Brother Chu want so much power? Anyway, he would have to return to the deep mountains and forests to cultivate, so he could not take it with him. Chu Xiu nodded and said, Thank you, Pavilion Master. However, how are you going to stop the people from Cold River City? I reckon that soon Cold River City will receive the news, and may come looking for trouble with the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Zhong Qiushui's eyes revealed a hint of coldness as he said, How? If we can't stop them, we will fight them head-on. The old Pavilion Master prioritizes stability. Li Wuxiang is also very timid. The Imperial Sky Pavilion has been passed down for so many years. How can we not have any trump cards? I can't defeat Yi Weikong, but if the Cold River City really wants to destroy the Imperial Sky Pavilion, then I will break their teeth and splash their blood even if I have to risk my life. You should know that the Imperial Sky Pavilion is not the only major sect in the East region. Chapter 1176. Zhong Qiushui's character was actually the most suitable for the Imperial Sky Pavilion. This was because his character was extreme, He was fearless, and he did things in a crazy manner. The old pavilion master was old, and Li Wuxiang had too many considerations. Therefore, he always chose to give in to Cold River City. However, Zhang Qiushui was different. His ruthlessness could make Cold River City hesitate in taking action. After all, Cold River City had Yi Weikong now and was in a prosperous period. There was no need to risk their lives against the Imperial Sky Pavilion at this time. With the Imperial Sky Pavilion's current foundation and trump cards, just like what Zhang Qiushui said, they would break Cold River City's teeth and splash their blood even if they had to risk their lives. There was an even more powerful High Heaven sect in the eastern region that was eyeing them covetously. If Cold River City's vitality was damaged because of this, High Heaven sect definitely wouldn't mind annihilating Cold River City to get rid of a future trouble. After Chu Xiu returned to Kangwu County, Su Fengshan and the others received the news as well. To be honest, they were really shocked this time. The position of Imperial Sky Pavilion's pavilion master had changed hands. Such a big event was actually completed in a day. When they received the news, they were generally dumbfounded. Moreover, what surprised Su Fengshan the most was Chu Xiu's resignation. The news from the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters gave Chu Xiu the authority to establish himself as the king of Kangwu County. However, Kangwu County was still under the Imperial Sky Pavilion's jurisdiction in name. This made Su Fengshan and the others speculate that Chu Xiu must have played a very important role in the Imperial Sky Pavilion's rebellion. Of course, the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters wouldn't reveal the details of the Imperial Sky Pavilion's rebellion so easily. Only some small details were leaked occasionally. Of course, these had nothing to do with Chu Xiu anymore. From now on, even the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters had no right to come to the southern barbaric land and order him around. In theory, he was no different from being independent. In Kangwu County, everyone else was in seclusion, making use of the precious land that was the absolute celestial to improve their cultivation base. Shang Tianliang, on the other hand, was planting vegetables. Lu Jianghe was the only one who was strolling around idly. When Chu Xiu asked him the reason, Lu Jianghe confidently said that he had been trapped in the pearl for 500 years and had enough seclusion. Going out to kill people and suck their blood to obtain power was far more practical than seclusion. Just as Chu Xiu was about to go into seclusion, Master Yuanji sent him a message, saying that he had completed the rootless sacred flame teleportation formation. He asked him how he should deal with Chao Heng and Zhuge Qingshan. After receiving this news, Chu Xiu stopped his closed-door cultivation and hurried back to the lower realm. Lu Jianghe felt bored and followed Chu Xiu back to the lower realm. In the stronghold of the southern barbaric land, Master Yuanji had a smug look on his face. He was waiting for Chu Xiu to show off his achievements. In fact, the construction of the rootless sacred flame formation, Chao Ying's wonderful ideas and Zhuge Qingshan's solid cultivation in Array Dao were more useful than Master Yuanji. However, he was on the same side. Therefore, even if Chu Xiu wanted to reward him, he would definitely reward him the most. When he arrived with Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe, Chu Xiu was the first to say to Master Yuanji, "Not bad, you did a good job." Master Yuanji rubbed his hands excitedly. He knew that Chu Xiu would not praise people easily, but as long as he praised you, you really did a good job. Zhuge Qingshan, who was on the side, cupped his hands and said, "Cult Master Chu, now that this formation is completed, I wonder if I can return to the real martial arts cult? Please rest assured, Cult Master Chu, I will definitely keep my mouth shut. I will not say anything that I saw in the southern barbaric land." Zhuge Qingshan had been staying at Chu Xiu's place for a long time. He was originally forced to come. How could he, a dignified Taoist spiritual master, mingle with a group of people from the demonic sects? Therefore, during the period of studying the formation, he did not slack off at all. He directly exerted all he had learned in order to help Chu Xiu complete the formation as much as possible, so that he could be freed earlier. Therefore, now that he had finally completed the formation, he was waiting to be freed. He also looked at Chu Xiu eagerly, hoping that Chu Xiu would let him go. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Master Zhuge has worked hard during this period. If you want to leave, then go back. If you want to visit my Kunlun mountain, I will also welcome you." Upon hearing this, Zhuge Qingshan left in a hurry. Kunlun Mountain? He did not want to go to that kind of devil's den in his next life. Although Zhuge Qingshan was very strong, Chu Xiu did not really care. If Zhuge Qingshan wanted to leave, then so be it. After all, Chu Xiu did not see anything really confidential. Even if Zhuge Qingshan did not keep his mouth shut, it did not matter. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Cao Shen and said directly, Master Cao Shen, it is impossible for you to return to Eastern Qi now. Eastern Qi may not dare to take you in. Why don't you join my saint cult? As long as Master Cao Shen can create something that satisfies me, my saint cult will never mistreat our own people. Cao Shen was a person who only focused on studying formations. He was too lazy to care about the disputes between the righteous and the demonic. Therefore, he said directly, Can you give me all the formation inheritance of the heaven-weeping demon? Chu Xiu said, I can give you a part of it. In the future, if you can research more formations for my saint cult, I can give you the rest of the formation inheritance of the heaven-weeping demon. Cao Shen did not even hesitate and said directly, Deal. To him, the Kunlun devil cult was strong and big enough. It would definitely provide him with more resources than Eastern Qi could provide him, so he could invest more into the research of formations. The most important thing was that there was the formation inheritance of the heaven-weeping demon. That was something that Cao Shen had longed for a long time. He only got a part of it before, but that part had already benefited him immensely. Because the formation of the passageway between the two worlds had been completely connected, the intelligence of the lower realm would be transmitted to the southern barbaric lands of the exalted heaven almost every day, and then from the southern barbaric lands to the formation of the Southern Peace Prefecture, and finally to Kangwu County. Although this set of procedures was extremely complicated, it could also ensure that the slightest movement in the lower realm could not be hidden from Chu Xiu. Therefore, even if he did not come to the lower realm, Chu Xiu could also know everything about the lower realm. Recently, the lower realm was relatively stable. After Chu Xiu destroyed the two major Buddhist sects, he began to be a construction maniac in the Nanman land. He frantically built branches, as if he wanted to build the Nanman land into a second Kunlun. Most of the people in the pugilistic world felt relieved about the behavior of the Kunlun devil cult. The Kunlun devil cult finally stopped expanding, which was one less threat for them. But some warriors with more foresight were more worried when they heard the news. 500 years ago, when the Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, the branches were also opened all over the pugilistic world. Even in places like the western region, there were branches of the Kunlun devil cult. At that time, the branches of the Kunlun devil cult would connect together and nibble away step by step, which would disintegrate the whole pugilistic world. Of course, there were always a few people who felt this sense of crisis. Many people even felt that Chu Xiu was more trustworthy. At least, he said that he would not find trouble with other martial arts forces after destroying the Buddhism. He really did it. There was nothing to do in the lower realm. Chu Xiu wanted to return to the Daoyu Ocean, but he stopped halfway. Lu Jiang, he said in surprise, You're not going to return to the Daoyu Ocean? You want to get rid of the remnants of the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery? Although Chu Xiu had destroyed the Buddhism, there were still some remnants of the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery outside. Because Chu Xiu had been busy with the Daoyu Ocean issue, he did not have time to destroy them. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, It has nothing to do with the Buddhism. I just suddenly remembered that we still have a strong enemy in the lower realm, a ticking time bomb. The Heavenly Gate? Lu Jiang, he frowned. Chu Xiu nodded. In the lower realm, in terms of power, Chu Xiu was almost at the peak. In terms of power, there were only a few people that Chu Xiu was not confident of dealing with. One was the old celestial master, who was unfathomable. Although he was old, the older he got, the more energetic he became. The other was Yi Xiaonan, who had almost reached the limit of the mysterious heaven and earth realm. As for the last one, it was Jun Wuxian from the Heavenly Gate. Both Jun Wuxian and the Heavenly Gate were very difficult to deal with. Of course, there was also Zhong Xinxiu. However, it was not important. As long as you did not actively provoke Zhong Xinxiu and touch his karma, he would not make things difficult for you. Among the three, the old celestial master did not have any grudges with Chu Xiu, and the position of the celestial master mansion was not that extreme. Yi Xiaonan also pursued the peak of the martial way. Although both sides were of the demonic path, at least before the righteous path completely declined, the two sides were unlikely to fight. Jun Wuxian was the only one that Chu Xiu was most afraid of. The 7 arrows nailed to the head last time were extremely evil. Chu Xiu did not even see the person, and almost lost his life. When Lu Jianghe heard about the heavenly gate, he scratched his head and felt that it was a little tricky. He did not care about the heavenly gate 500 years ago. What was there to be proud of for a force that was almost slaughtered by the sect master? However, that was 500 years ago, not now. Although Chu Xiu was also a sect master, it was clear that he was not as powerful as the patriarch Dugu 500 years ago. Lu Jianghe shook his head and said, "You want to take care of the heavenly gate now? It's extremely difficult. How are you going to take care of Jun Wuxian alone?" Chu Xiu also shook his head and said, "I cannot take care of Jun Wuxian. In the Daoyu Ocean, I have seen several martial immortal level experts. I am certain that Li Wuxiang and Zhong Qiushui are both inferior to Jun Wuxian. There is only Yi Weikong. I cannot determine who is stronger or weaker between him and Jun Wuxian. However, even if we cannot defeat Jun Wuxian, we must still think of a way to understand the situation of the Heavenly Gate. Otherwise, once the Heavenly Gate attacks, we will not even have the chance to resist." Chapter 1177. Elysium's matter had been weighing on Chu Xiu's mind for a long time. If it wasn't resolved, it would always be a huge threat. During this period of time, Elysium didn't do anything to the Kunlun devil cult. Even when Chu Xiu wasn't around for a year, Elysium didn't do anything. Now that Chu Xiu was back, Elysium still didn't do anything. Hence, Chu Xiu guessed that Elysium must have encountered some problem, and couldn't do anything for the time being. Elysium had always been mysterious. They rarely had more than 2 divine generals appear in the martial world. It wasn't strange for something like this to happen. But since Elysium didn't do anything, Chu Xiu couldn't pretend that he didn't know anything. Otherwise, this bomb might explode at any time. Lu Jianghe looked at Chu Xiu suspiciously and said, "So what do you plan to do? With Elysium's current strength, going to them is equivalent to courting death." Chu Xiu squinted and said, "I don't need to go to them. I just need to know the detailed information about Elysium at all times. That's enough. I can't deal with Jun Wuxian, but can't the divine generals of Elysium?" Lu Jianghe seemed to understand Chu Xiu's plan, but he thought about it and said, "But where are you going to find the divine generals of Elysium? You don't even know if the divine generals of Elysium have appeared in the martial world. You can't just go to the foot of West Kunlun to stop them, can you?" "We don't know, but someone might know." "Who?" "Wind Sweeping Tower." At this moment, Wind Sweeping Tower didn't know that they were being targeted by Chu Xiu. On the top floor of Wind Sweeping Tower in Nanliang City, Eastern Qi, Fang Fifan and Qi Yuanli each took a deck chair and sat outside, drinking tea and basking in the sun. This was Qi Yuanli's habit, but Fang Fifan was infected with it. Of course, in reality, it was Chu Xiu's return and the destruction of the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Monastery. The amount of information added together was shocking. That was why the Wind Sweeping Tower had been operating at full capacity for a period of time, sorting out and collecting all kinds of information. It was only now that they were free and had the time to bask in the sun and drink tea. "The two of you are really in a good mood. You actually have time to drink tea and bask in the sun here. People like me are fighting with their lives on the line in a storm of blood, so I don't have such leisure time. If you don't cultivate, you'll be killed. You can't stay idle, and you don't dare to stay idle." Chu Xiu's figure descended from the sky. The Wind Sweeping Tower's formation sensed this powerful force. However, just as a ray of light appeared, Chu Xiu waved his hand and the light of the formation was immediately extinguished. It was destroyed without any hesitation. Fang Fifan and Qi Yuanli were shocked to see Chu Xiu suddenly appear. Fang Fifan even knocked over the teapot in front of him. The hot tea spilled all over his pants, making him grimace in pain. Although he was also a martial artist and even had the strength of the real pellet state, No one would be bored enough to train that place to be as hard as steel and iron. They were all men, so they still had to be hurt. Cult Master Chu is coming. Why didn't you inform us in advance? We didn't come to greet you. Please forgive us, Cult Master Chu. Qi Yuanli quickly cupped his fist and said. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, we're all old acquaintances, no need to be so polite. I won't keep the two of you in suspense. I'll be frank. I came to the wind-sweeping tower to ask for your help. Upon hearing this, Qi Yuanli and Feng Fifan looked at each other silently and smiled bitterly. In the current underworld, those who had a relationship with Chu Xiu had never had a good ending. But the problem was, they wanted to refuse, but did they have the guts? So Feng Fifan had to ask. I don't know what Cult Master Chu wants us to do. Our wind-sweeping pavilion will definitely do our best and not decline. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, it's very simple, help me find someone. Feng Fifan breathed a sigh of relief and said, it turns out to be looking for someone. Wind-sweeping tower happens to be good at this. I wonder who official Chu is looking for? Chu Xiu said faintly, Elysium Divine General. Upon hearing this, Feng Fifan and Qi Yuanli almost sat down again. Even if Chu Xiu asked them to look for the remnants of the Great Light Temple and Sabodhi Temple, they would still do it. The wind-sweeping tower was not part of the righteous path. To be more accurate, they were just the Jianghu's information brokers. They would provide information to whoever was stronger and could offer more benefits. But now that Chu Xiu asked them to investigate the Elysium Divine General, they really didn't dare. It wasn't that they couldn't, but they didn't dare. In the entire underworld, Wind-Sweeping Tower had the most information. They might have even forgotten some of the secrets of other sects, but Wind-Sweeping Tower still kept them. But the more they knew, the more they feared the unknown. This was how Elysium was to Wind-Sweeping Tower. For so many years, Wind-Sweeping Tower had very little information about Elysium. Even now they didn't know what kind of existence Elysium was. In Wind-Sweeping Tower's impression, Elysium was powerful and mysterious. Wind-Sweeping Tower really didn't want to provoke such an existence. Seeing their expressions, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, why, is it difficult? Feng Fifan smiled bitterly and said, it's a little difficult. You should know that the Elysium Divine General rarely appears in the underworld. Most of the time he appears, he's alone. Moreover, Wind-Sweeping Tower doesn't even have the information of the 9 Divine Generals. Looking for a Divine General from Elysium at this time is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Tower Leader Feng, you still haven't told me the truth. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's impossible, right? It seems that Wind-Sweeping Tower still doesn't want to help me. Feng Fifan's expression immediately changed. He quickly said, I didn't. That's not what I meant. Cult Master Chu, listen to me. Chu Xiu waved his hand and interrupted him directly. Actually, I don't like to threaten people because it's not very technical. If you don't work for me, I'll kill you. It's really boring to say things like that too much. Besides, I'm a reasonable person. Most of the time, I like to make a deal, not threaten. After all, a melon that's forcefully picked won't be sweet. At this point, a faint smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. He said, how about this, you and I play a game? Make a guess. If you don't help me, you'll die. Was this sentence true or false? If you're right, I'll leave now. What do you think? As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, Feng Fifan's face revealed a smile that was uglier than crying. No, no, no. Official Chu, we won't play. We've agreed. I'll ask all the anemophilia in Wind-Sweeping Tower to temporarily put down everything and help Official Chu find the whereabouts of the Divine General of Elysium. A melon that was forcefully picked wasn't sweet, but it was very thirst-quenching. At least, Feng Fifan was immediately convinced by Chu Xiu's words. If there was a difficulty, he would help even if it meant overcoming it. A bright smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face as he said, I knew that with Tower Leader Feng and Tower Leader Qi's relationship with me, you wouldn't just sit by and do nothing. You two are indeed good friends. I'll wait for your news in South Beam City during this period of time. I'll remember this favor. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's figure leaped and disappeared before their eyes. Feng Fifan and Qi Yuanli glanced at each other, and they revealed helpless and bitter smiles. What else could they do but admit that they were unlucky when this young master came looking for them? It couldn't be helped. Moreover, Chu Xiu was still waiting in South Beam City, so they didn't even have the intention to pretend to agree but oppose him in secret. They only wanted to find the person as soon as possible and send Chu Xiu away. After a short while, Chu Xiu appeared in a private room in a restaurant in South Beam City. Lu Jiang he had already ordered a table full of dishes, and was eating and drinking to his heart's content. When he saw Chu Xiu return, Lu Jiang he poured a cup of wine for Chu Xiu and said, "Did those fellows from Wind Sweeping Tower agree?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "They only agreed after threatening them. It seems like Wind Sweeping Tower is still slightly afraid of the Elysium." Lu Jiang he laughed with disdain and said, "Compared to the Elysium, they should be even more afraid of you right now. I told you a long time ago that those fellows from Wind Sweeping Tower are all fence-sitters. They're slippery and slippery. Just go to their door with a knife, and just tell them if they'll help or not. They'll naturally make the right choice. During the peak of my holy sect all those years ago, Wind Sweeping Tower even secretly passed all the information to the intelligence department of my holy sect, and they completely betrayed those sections. Oh, what happened to the information after that?" Lu Jiang he shrugged and said, "Of course it was after the Kunlun devil cult was annihilated, and it was completely burned to the ground. Those fellows from Wind Sweeping Tower can be considered to be geniuses for being able to develop to such a scale until now." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "The reason isn't because of Wind Sweeping Tower, but because the Elysium needs them. They need an anemophilia that can control information. Other than the peak holy sect in the past, no other sects can extend their reach to the entire Elysium. Therefore, they need an existence that doesn't belong to any forces, but can be used by everyone." Lu Jiang he swallowed a chicken drumstick and said, "But do you really believe that Wind Sweeping Tower can find the divine generals of the Elysium? Those fellows come and go like ghosts. It's not easy to find their shadows. Don't underestimate Wind Sweeping Tower. Their pugilistic world news agents can be found in every corner. Those low-level warriors that you don't care about, or even ordinary people, could be their pugilistic world news agent. It's true that the divine generals of the Elysium are strong, but no matter how strong they are, as long as they appear in the Elysium and fall into the eyes of others, they can't escape the eyes of Wind Sweeping Tower's anemophilia. In other words, if even Wind Sweeping Tower can't find any clues about the divine generals of the Elysium, then we don't have to put in any effort to look for them. That most likely means that they have not appeared in the Elysium at all." Chu Xiu was very confident in Wind Sweeping Tower, and Wind Sweeping Tower didn't let Chu Xiu down. In other words, they wanted to send away the god of plague, Chu Xiu, as soon as possible. Therefore, in less than a month, Wind Sweeping Tower sent the news to Chu Xiu. Wind Sweeping Tower found the whereabouts of an Elysium divine general in West Chu. Chapter 1178. In Sichuan it was drizzling like silk. Xue Wuli walked in the misty rain. He did not use his genuine qi to guide the rain. Instead, he let it fall on his body. He even closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. He had never seen rain before. It did not rain in Kunlun Mountain. This was the first time Xue Wuli had been outside since he was brought to the gate of heaven as a child. Maybe he had even forgotten what rain looked like after a long time. Then again, it was thanks to Chu Xiu of the Kunlun devil cult that he could go out this time. If Chu Xiu had not killed that idiot Sir God Luo, resulting in the vacancy of the divine generals, and there would have been 2 more divine generals, he might have had to stay in the heavenly gates to continue his cultivation. Of course, many people wanted to become a divine general in the gate of heaven, but you had to endure decades of lonely practice and fight with your fellow disciples. In the divine general ranking, no one would hold back, because only by becoming a divine general could one enter the gate of heaven and have the right to be free. Although it was only for a period of time, it was enough to enjoy this feeling. In fact, Xue Wuli had long discovered the heavenly key in the mission. However, he was not in a hurry to snatch it. Instead, he slowly followed behind Lin Fan, enjoying the feeling of a cat chasing a mouse. In a simple pavilion on the side of the official road, A man wearing a bamboo hat was hiding from the rain. He was holding a big box in his arms, but his expression was sneaky. Seeing Xue Wuli walk into the pavilion, he was shocked, but after seeing that the person was not one of those people, he let out a sigh of relief. But then Xue Wuli said with a faint smile, "Tang Zhan, the abandoned disciple of the Tang sect?" The man called Tang Zhan immediately jumped up and shouted, "Who the hell are you?" Xue Wuli shook his head and said, "Don't be nervous. I'm not sent by the Tang sect to kill you." Hearing Xue Wuli's words, Tang Zhan let out a sigh of relief. But the next moment, Xue Wuli said, "But there is something I really need from you. You don't know its value, so it's okay. But now you can definitely guess that it's very important, so I can't keep you." Silencing someone. TSK, this is the first time I've done something like this. I don't have any experience. But don't worry, it shouldn't be very painful. While Xue Wuli was rambling on, Tang Zhan decisively lifted up the big box in front of him. The next moment, countless hidden weapons rained down on Xue Wuli like a storm. This scene seemed shocking, but what happened next caused Tang Zhan to collapse. His proud works, all kinds of carefully crafted hidden weapons, were simply unable to withstand a single blow from Xue Wuli. None of the hidden weapons were able to penetrate Xue Wuli's protective aura qi, and they all fell to the ground with tinkling sounds. Tang Zhan only had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm. This time, he completely understood that there was a world of difference between him and Xue Wuli. Just as Xue Wuli reached out a hand and was about to grab Tang Zhan, a faint voice came over. "Divine General Xue Wuli?" Xue Wuli's hand that had just reached out suddenly retracted, and his eyes revealed a trace of horror. When did someone come to his side? He actually didn't notice it at all. Behind Xue Wuli, Chu Xiu just stood there quietly. The raindrops that fell on him were not bounced off by the protective aura qi, but strangely integrated into his body. The raindrops gathered at his feet like a stream, as if he existed in this world. Lu Jiang, he was holding an oiled paper bag in his hand. It turned out to be a bashu snack, fried crispy pork. He stood on the other side, eating while sizing up Xue Wuli as if he was watching a show. Against a warrior in the true fire spirit refinement realm, even if he was a divine general of Elysium, Chu Xiu felt like killing a chicken with a dragon saber. There was no difficulty at all, so he had no intention of making a move. Chu Xiu. Xue Wuli's originally calm and relaxed eyes instantly became extremely shocked. Demon Master Chu Xiu, the Chu Xiu who had killed two of their divine generals, the Chu Xiu who had just destroyed the North and South Buddhist sects. Even if Xue Wuli thought highly of himself and had the inherent arrogance of a divine general, when facing Chu Xiu, that so-called arrogance turned into fear. He didn't even have the courage to fight with Chu Xiu. In the next moment, a layer of blood mist exploded around Xue Wuli and integrated into the raindrops around him. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had already appeared hundreds of feet away, leaving only a faint layer of blood mist in the air. Xue Wuli could be considered extremely decisive. Without saying a word, he directly used the blood escape secret technique. "Where do you think you're going?" Xue Wuli looked in front of him in horror. He clearly didn't feel Chu Xiu move, but Chu Xiu had strangely appeared in front of him. Xue Wuli had just changed his direction, but before he could do anything, in the direction he was looking at, another figure of Chu Xiu appeared. "Am I that scary? You run when you see me." Xue Wuli looked around. In all directions, there were figures of Chu Xiu. Even if he raised his mental strength to the extreme, he still couldn't see clearly which was real and which was fake. "Ah! All of you go to hell!" Xue Wuli let out a crazed roar and punched out. Boundless blood mist merged with the surrounding raindrops, causing the raindrops to be filled with a violent force of gang qi, scattering wildly in all directions. A burst of violent gang qi exploded, and even the official road was destroyed beyond recognition. Finally, Chu Xiu's figure could no longer be seen. Just as Xue Wuli had just breathed a sigh of relief, a voice came from behind him. "Are you looking for me?" Xue Wuli had just turned around, and Chu Xiu had already easily torn apart his gang qi protection. He directly grabbed his neck and lifted him up. A powerful gang qi poured into Xue Wuli's body, instantly sealing all the meridians in his body. Listen to me, don't move and you won't die. It was unknown when Lu Jiang he had hidden in the pavilion. Seeing Chu Xiu lift Shui Wuli up like a little chick, he couldn't help but shake his head and say, "Poor child." Seeing Tang Zhan, who was already dumbfounded, Lu Jiang he handed over the little crispy pork in his hand and said, "Want a piece? Hey, what's that thing that shoots the hidden weapon made of? It's quite interesting. It's just that the hidden weapon is a bit weak. If it's made with good materials and engraved with patterns, it can even kill real pellet state and real fire spirit refinement state martial artists. By the way, I also know a guy who also plays with hidden weapons. His surname is Tang and his name is Tangya. Do you know him?" Tang Zhan subconsciously took a piece of little crispy pork and threw it into his mouth, but he even forgot to chew. Everything that had happened today had ruined his worldview. Previously, Shui Wuli's strength had already made him feel that he couldn't resist. It was a kind of strength that made people feel desperate. As a result, such a person was now shivering in someone's hand. This scene brought a huge impact to Tang Zhan. At this time, Shui Wuli wasn't actually shivering as Tang Zhan thought. Although he was indeed shivering, it was also because Chu Xiu had sealed the meridians of his whole body. His aura was running strongly in his body, so it gave people a feeling of shivering. Although he was a newly promoted Elysium Divine General, he was also a powerhouse of real fire spirit refinement state. He stood out in countless competitions and fights since he was a child, so his endurance shouldn't be so low. But at this time, Shui Wuli's eyes also showed a touch of despair. He knew the relationship between Chu Xiu and Elysium. Later, he also learned from Zhu Tianxiao that Jun Wuxian plotted against Chu Xiu with the 7 needles. But it was because he knew this that he felt desperate. He fell into the hands of Chu Xiu, who had a blood feud with Elysium. He had no hope of surviving. Previously, he was still thinking that he should thank Chu Xiu for killing immortal Lord Luo and giving him the opportunity to rise. But now that Chu Xiu had killed him, there was someone in Elysium who should thank Chu Xiu for giving him the opportunity to rise. Thinking of this, Shui Wuli gritted his teeth and said, "Chu Xiu, you are the master of the Kunlun devil cult, the leader of the demonic path, and the supreme figure in Jianghu. If you have the guts, then give me a quick death." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Who said I'm going to kill you?" "I said, as long as you are obedient, you won't die." The next moment, Chu Xiu's figure moved and he was already in the pavilion. He glanced at Tang Zhan and asked, "Do you know me?" Tang Zhan shivered for a moment. Then he seemed to have reacted. He bowed respectfully to Chu Xiu and said, "I'm Tang Zhan, an abandoned disciple of the Tang family fort. Greetings, Cult Master Chu. I was an ordinary hidden weapon craftsman in the Tang family, because..." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I'm not interested in listening to your messy life experience. You have seen enough things today. Logically speaking, I should kill you. But you definitely don't want to die, so give me a reason. What can you do? What value do you have that can make me not kill you?" Tang Zhan was so scared that his face turned pale, and his mind went blank. He almost subconsciously shouted, "According to the secret hidden weapon atlas of the Tang family fort, I have researched a mechanical hidden weapon that combines thousands of hidden weapon techniques, the 1,000 changing weapons. As long as the materials are enough and the hidden weapon is inscribed with a strong enough array, it can kill real pellet state or even real fire spirit refinement state powerhouse. There is no blueprint for 1,000 transformation. The blueprint is in my head. In the entire underworld, only I can create 1,000 transformation." Lu Jianghe on the side snorted. This kid plagiarized his ideas. These 2 points were put forward by him. Chu Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said, "Yes, from now on, you are a member of my saint cult. You are responsible for creating hidden weapons for my saint cult, and the 1,000 transformation you mentioned." Just when Tang Zhan was relieved, Chu Xiu said again, "Take out that thing on you. It's not a good thing. It will lead to a fatal disaster." As Chu Xiu said, he waved his hand and a brocade box flew out of Tang Zhan. The lid was opened. Inside it was a heavenly key. Chapter 1179. After getting the heavenly key from Tang Zhan, Chu Xiu didn't even ask Tang Zhan how he got it. He just gave him a token and sent Tang Zhan to report to the Kunlun Devil Cult's branch in South China. Anyway, with Tang Zhan's strength, Chu Xiu absolutely wouldn't dare to have any ideas. He was already thankful that he could live. Chu Xiu took a look at the heavenly key. This thing didn't matter to the current Chu Xiu. The heavenly key that Elysium had carefully collected was no longer mysterious to Chu Xiu. You want this thing? Chu Xiu waved the heavenly key in front of Xue Wuli. Xue Wuli snorted and said, "If you want to kill me, then kill me. You are such a big shot. Is it interesting to humiliate me like this?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I said as long as you are obedient, I won't kill you. If I really wanted to kill you, would I need to do it myself?" Xue Wuli glanced at Lu Jianghe, who was eating and watching the show. Just this person alone was enough to restrain him. Their cultivation methods were somewhat similar, but his strength was definitely not as good as the Hall Master of the Blood Demon Hall from 500 years ago. "What do you want?" Xue Wuli looked at Chu Xiu with a confused look in his eyes. Just like what Chu Xiu had said, it seemed that Chu Xiu really didn't intend to kill him this time. Chu Xiu placed the heavenly key in front of Xue Wuli and said lightly, "Is the Elysium Divine General very powerful? If you are not in seclusion all day long, you are collecting this thing. If there is no news of this thing appearing in Jianghu, you can't even leave Elysium. Have you ever considered changing your master? My sacred sect's Hall Master commands tens of thousands of diabolism experts. He's so awe-inspiring that even the sect masters of the major sects have to bow and greet him. Isn't he as awe-inspiring as a lone divine general of the Elysium?" As he spoke, Chu Xiu pointed at Lu Jianghe and said, "That guy who only knows how to eat and eat all day can be the hall leader of the Blood Demon Hall for 2 generations. Do you think that if I give you a chance, you will be worse than him?" Lu Jianghe was stunned. Who did he offend? Is eating something wrong? Xue Wuli was stunned by Chu Xiu's words. He had never expected that Chu Xiu would recruit him, a divine general of the Elysium. Xue Wuli was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was very smart. An existence who could stand out among the divine generals would either have strength or brains. Those who had neither could only be used as stepping stones. Thinking of the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Elysium, he almost instantly understood what Chu Xiu meant. "You want me to be a spy in the Elysium?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I like dealing with smart people. There's no need to talk too much nonsense. Your cultivation technique is also related to qi and blood, so you should know about the existence of the blood demon power. Let Lu Jianghe leave the blood god seal of the blood demon power on your body. As long as you're obedient, the blood god seal will not explode. When you become the sacred church master, the blood god seal will naturally be removed." Looking at Chu Xiu, Xue Wuli suddenly laughed strangely. Chu Xiu, I really didn't expect you to be so daring. For so many years, there were not many people in the pugilistic world who had designs on the Elysium Divine General. You actually wanted to bribe me to be a spy. How creative. But unfortunately, you have the wrong idea. This is simply impossible. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked at Xue Wuli. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Although this is the first time you have appeared in the pugilistic world, I have the information that Wind-Sweeping Building has collected about your actions along the way. According to what you have shown in the information, you are not a person who is not afraid of death. No matter how loyal you are to the Elysium, you should know that there are many things in this world that are actually more terrifying than death. You should know that I am not trying to scare you." Xue Wuli looked at Chu Xiu's emotionless eyes and suddenly shivered. As an enemy of the Elysium, there was a lot of information about Chu Xiu in the Elysium, so he knew what kind of person Chu Xiu was. Ruthless, and vicious. Now that he had fallen into the hands of Chu Xiu, it would not be surprising if Chu Xiu did anything. But Xue Wuli only revealed an expression that was uglier than crying. "Even if you torture me until death is better than me, it is useless. It is impossible for the warriors of the Elysium to betray us." Of course, Xue Wuli was afraid of death. He was a divine general of the Elysium, but he was also a human. Since he was a human, there were not many who were not afraid of death. Moreover, he was not that loyal to the Elysium. Anyway, there were only 2 impressions of the Elysium. One was that they were constantly fighting, and the other was that they were working for the Elysium. Hearing Xue Wuli's words, Chu Xiu could not help but frown and said, "What is the secret behind this?" Xue Wuli smiled bitterly and pointed to his own head. "You only know that there have been 9 divine generals in the Elysium, but few of you know that there are thousands of warriors under the Elysium being raised in the secret territory. These warriors are brought into the Elysium from a young age, and are placed in the secret land to fight. Among 1,000 people, there may not even be one who can stand out and become a divine general of the Elysium. For so many years, there have been traitors in every sect, and there have been people with bad intentions in every sect. But only the Elysium has not. Do you know why? Because from the beginning, from the day we ascended to the Elysium, our lives no longer belong to us. From the moment we stepped into the Elysium left a spiritual imprint in our minds. The spiritual imprint makes it impossible for us to do anything to harm the Elysium. Otherwise, we will have a splitting headache, and even our primordial spirit will dissipate. Moreover, the spiritual imprint is connected to an ancient formation of the Elysium. It is said that the core of the formation is the brain of an ancient ferocious beast. As long as one wants to strip the spiritual imprint in this world, they will immediately be discovered by the people of the Elysium. They will be listed as traitors and hunted to death. Also, after becoming a divine general of the Elysium, we have to offer our heart blood and a trace of primordial spirit to make a soul lamp. A soul lamp can know the state of a divine general of the Elysium. When a person dies, the lamp will be extinguished. It can even be linked with the art of divination to know the location of the deceased, who killed them, and so on. It is useless if you want to leave a threatening imprint on me. As long as the soul lamp is present, you will be discovered the moment you leave the imprint. At that time, even if I return to the Elysium, I will still die. Your plan will not succeed. You will die sooner or later. Why don't you give me a quick death now?" Hearing Xue Wuli's words, Chu Xiu and Lu Jianghe were a little shocked. The Elysium simply controlled their own disciples to the extreme. No wonder for so many years, no one had ever heard of the Elysium's warriors rebelling, abandoning their disciples, and so on. It was because they simply did not have the opportunity to possess it. Chu Xiu frowned. He also did not expect that the first thing would be stuck here. If that was the case, then wouldn't Xue Wuli have been captured for nothing? They could only kill him to vent their anger? At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. He asked Xue Wuli, "You mean whether it is the formation that connects to your spiritual imprint or the soul lamp of the Elysium, they are all inside the Elysium. And as long as you divine generals are tampered with in any place, they will be discovered?" Although Xue Wuli did not know what Chu Xiu meant by this question, he still nodded and said, "They will definitely be discovered. In the past, there was a divine general of the Elysium who wanted to betray the Elysium. He specially went to a small tribe in the western regions that was good at spiritual occult techniques, and asked someone to help remove the spiritual imprint. But he was still discovered. Then his position was determined as fast as possible, and he was killed as fast as possible." Chu Xiu said lightly, "The methods of the Elysium are indeed very meticulous. But even if your formation can detect the whole world, what about changing the world and changing the rules of heaven and earth?" As he spoke, Chu Xiu directly carried Xue Wuli and went all the way to the southern land, to the branch hall established by the Kunlun devil cult. Xue Wuli did not know what Chu Xiu meant, but as he walked along, he was really shocked. The Kunlun devil cult carried out large-scale construction in the southern land and established more than 10 branch halls. In particular, the most central branch hall was protected by countless formations. Its degree of security was even comparable to that of the Kunlun devil cult. Was it because Chu Xiu felt that Kunlun mountain was too cold, so he was ready to move the entire Kunlun devil cult to the southern land? Before Xue Wuli had time to think, Chu Xiu took him directly to the deepest part of the most central branch hall. There was only one thing in it, a large formation that was always activated. That great formation was a defensive formation set up by Grandmaster Yuanji, Chao Heng, and Zhuge Qingshan, who were the most powerful formation masters in the world. Even if an expert in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth came, he would not be able to break it easily. But the strange thing was that there was nothing in it. Xue Wuli was also secretly puzzled. Such a formation was set up, but there was nothing in it. What was this formation protecting? Air. Before Xue Wuli could react, Chu Xiu took him and walked directly into the formation with Lu Jianghe. In an instant, a suction hit him, and Xue Wuli appeared in a hall with a dumbfounded look. It was not strange to suddenly change space. There was a secret realm in the Elysium itself. But the heaven and earth yuan qi in that secret realm was not as thick and rich as in this hall. The most important thing was that Xue Wuli could feel that the aura in this hall was a little different. It was even different from all the auras he had felt before, but he could not tell exactly what was different. Chu Xiu put his hand on the top of Xue Wuli's head and said lightly, "Okay, now it's time to remove the spiritual imprint in your body." "No!" Xue Wuli suddenly shouted in horror. He had seen the backlash when the spiritual imprint was removed. There was once a disciple of the Elysium who made a mistake and was killed after his spiritual imprint was removed. Removing the imprint would not only alarm the Elysium, but it would also cause a great backlash that would make people wish they were dead. Chu Xiu did not care so much. He stimulated his spiritual force to the maximum and forcibly probed into Xue Wuli's body. In his spirit, he found the spiritual imprint and destroyed it violently. Xue Wuli opened his mouth wide, and his face was full of disbelief. The imprint was destroyed? There was no backlash, as if it had lost its effect. What was going on? You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.